Under the gold glow of chandeliers, laughter filled the ballroom like music meant only for the rich. Every detail of the night sparkled, the crystal glasses, the string quartet, the air thick with perfume and money. Men in tuxedos spoke of stocks and power. Women in diamonds compared husbands, handbags, and lives they never really lived. No one looked at the servers, not really. They moved like shadows between the tables, silent, unseen, carrying other people's weight. One of those shadows was a woman named Maya Carter. Her steps were soft, her face calm. The ivory dress she wore wasn't part of the uniform, it was her own. She'd sewn it herself from scraps of fabric she bought secondhand, never imagining it would make her a target. She carried a tray of empty glasses close to her chest, careful not to bump into anyone. She'd learned long ago that in places like this, mistakes were remembered, but kindness was not. Then, from across the room, Claudia Whitmore noticed her. Claudia, the kind of woman who wore her cruelty like perfume. Her hair was perfect, her diamonds heavy, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She was the hostess of the night, the queen of the room, and she had already decided that everyone should remember it. But when her husband, Daniel Whitmore, turned his head and looked, just for a moment, at the quiet woman with the tray, something in Claudia stiffened. It wasn't jealousy. It was something worse. It was fear of being invisible. "Excuse me," Claudia said, her tone dripping with ice. "Waitress." Maya turned, still holding the tray, unsure if she was being called or condemned. "Yes, ma'am," she asked softly. Claudia's eyes moved over her, from her shoes to the strap of her dress. "That's not your uniform, is it? Who told you you could wear that?" Maya blinked, confused. "Ma'am, this is—" But the words never left her mouth. With one sudden brutal motion, Claudia reached forward and grabbed the strap of Maya's dress. The sound of tearing fabric cut through the room like thunder. Gasps spread through the crowd as the tray slipped from Maya's trembling hands, crashing to the marble floor. The glasses shattered, the noise echoing off the walls like gunfire. For 1 second, everything stopped. The laughter, the music, even the air. Maya stood frozen, her hand clutching the torn strap, her eyes wide with shock. Her shoulder was bare, her dignity in ruins, and no one moved to help her. Around her, the faces of the wealthy looked on with silent fascination, the kind people reserve for accidents they don't plan to stop. Claudia's voice came again, colder this time. "Maybe next time you'll remember your place." But that's when the chair scraped back from the head of the table. Daniel Whitmore rose slowly, his expression unreadable, his movements deliberate. He set his glass down gently on the tablecloth, his hand trembling not from fear, but from fury. He stepped toward his wife, his voice low but strong enough to slice through the silence. "Claudia," he said, his tone a warning wrapped in disbelief, "do you have any idea who you just touched?" The crowd shifted, whispers rippling. Claudia blinked, confused by his words. "What are you talking about?" she hissed. "She's just a waitress." Daniel's eyes didn't leave Maya's face. He saw the pain there, the humiliation she tried to hide behind steady breath. And suddenly he remembered. Years ago, a bookstore in Atlanta. A broken-down car. A young woman who had offered him help when no one else would. A woman with the same eyes. Maya tried to speak. "It's okay," she whispered, voice breaking. "Please. I just want to leave." But Daniel's voice grew louder, shaking now with anger. "No, it's not okay." The crowd looked between them, uncertain whether to stay or run. The tension felt alive, pressing against their ribs. The rich hated this kind of silence. It made them uncomfortable, reminded them that their laughter could be drowned out by truth. Maya backed away, her hands trembling. The strap dangled uselessly at her side. She bent to pick up the broken pieces of glass, but her tears blurred her vision. Daniel stepped forward to stop her, his hand hovering for a moment, not daring to touch. Claudia scoffed. "Oh please, Daniel, don't make a scene. It was just a dress." He turned toward her, his voice sharp now. "No, Claudia. It wasn't just a dress. It was a person. And you tore her apart in front of everyone like she was nothing." The weight of his words settled over the room. Even the chandeliers seemed dimmer. Claudia's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She only turned away, her face burning with humiliation, though not for what she'd done, but for being called out. Maya stood there, silent, holding the edge of her torn gown. Around her, people avoided eye contact, their empathy too expensive to spend. And then she walked out. No one stopped her. The doors closed behind her with a soft thud that sounded like an ending. But it wasn't the end. It was the start of something none of them would ever forget. Daniel stayed frozen for a moment, staring at the empty space where she had been. The laughter slowly returned to the room, nervous and forced. Someone raised a glass. The music tried to start again, but the notes wavered. The illusion had cracked. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the servants cleaned up the last of the broken glass, Daniel sat alone at the table. He picked up a single shard, still wet from the spilled champagne, and turned it in his fingers. His reflection stared back, distorted, small. For the first time in years, he wondered who he had become. A man who could build an empire but couldn't stop cruelty under his own roof. A man surrounded by beauty, but starved of kindness. Outside, the rain began to fall softly, tapping against the tall windows like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the city, Maya was walking home, her torn dress wrapped around her shoulders, her chin held high despite the sting in her eyes. And Daniel whispered to no one, "Claudia, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Because deep down, he knew, what happened tonight wasn't just gossip for tomorrow's papers. It was the first crack in a wall that would soon come crashing down. He didn't know yet how far that moment would reach, how it would tear through reputations, through marriages, through the fragile pride of the rich. He didn't know that the woman who had been humiliated tonight would soon stand taller than all of them. But the truth had already begun to move. And the sound of that tear, the rip of fabric, the gasp of silence, would echo long after the music stopped. The morning after the gala, the city woke to headlines that burned through every news feed and gossip column. Billionaire's wife tears dress off black waitress in public. The photo was everywhere. Claudia's frozen face twisted in anger, Maya's shoulder bare, her eyes filled with shame. The internet called it what it was, racism dressed in designer silk. But inside the Whitmore mansion, Claudia wasn't apologizing. She was pacing, fuming, practicing lines for the cameras. "It was an accident," she said, checking her reflection in the mirror. "A misunderstanding." Daniel sat at the edge of their bed, his hands clasped, staring at the floor. He'd barely slept. The image of Maya's trembling hands, the sound of glass shattering, it all looped in his mind like punishment. He had seen that woman before, years ago, back when he was broke and trying to sell used books in a forgotten corner of Atlanta. Maya Carter. She was younger then, juggling 2 jobs, her hair always tied back, her smile tired but real. She had once helped him change a tire in the rain, refusing the $20 he tried to give her. "Kindness isn't a business deal," she'd said. He hadn't forgotten her face, or her strength. Now that same woman was on every channel, being torn apart again, this time by strangers with opinions. Reporters camped outside her tiny apartment. The hotel she worked for called her in and fired her for bringing negative attention. And when she went grocery shopping, people whispered behind her back. Humiliation travels fast when it's painted in color. Claudia told her husband not to worry. "It'll fade," she said between bites of her breakfast. "The media loves a scandal, but it'll be gone in a week." Daniel didn't answer. He watched her slice a strawberry with precision, the blade glinting under the morning light. "You hurt someone," he said quietly. Claudia rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. I touched a dress. Stop being dramatic." That's when something in him shifted. It wasn't rage. It was recognition that the woman across from him, the woman he'd built his empire with, didn't believe in empathy, only image. He realized he'd been living in a palace made of mirrors, each one reflecting a version of success that no longer looked like him. Later that afternoon, Daniel told his driver to cancel his meetings. He didn't go to the office. He drove himself to the part of town the rich only see through tinted windows. The community center sat on a cracked street, paint peeling, kids playing outside with one flat basketball. Inside, he found her. Maya was ladling soup into small plastic bowls, humming softly under her breath. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun. The apron she wore had a stain near the pocket. Around her, volunteers moved like a quiet rhythm, tired but kind. She didn't look up when Daniel entered. She didn't have to. She already knew who it was. He waited until the room cleared out before he spoke. "Maya," he said softly, "I came to apologize." She set the ladle down, wiped her hands, and faced him. Her eyes were calm but heavy with disappointment. "You didn't tear my dress," she said. "You don't need to apologize." He shook his head. "No. But I stood there. And I didn't stop it fast enough." For a long moment, they stood in silence. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space between them. Then she said, "Sorry doesn't feed a child, Mr. Whitmore." Her voice was gentle, not cruel. Just honest. Those words hit him harder than any headline. Sorry doesn't feed a child. They echoed through him long after he left, haunting him through the night, through board meetings, through the hollow clinking of expensive silverware. Meanwhile, Claudia was busy rehearsing her redemption. She held a press conference, pretending to cry, insisting she never meant harm. She talked about diversity, about charity, about forgiveness, all words that meant nothing when spoken through arrogance. But Daniel saw right through it. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the way she counted sympathy like money. At dinner, she leaned back in her chair, sipping wine. "My publicist says the outrage is dying down. Maybe we'll host a charity gala to smooth things over." Daniel didn't look up. "Another gala? To fix the last one?" "It's good optics," she said. "We'll donate to some organization, take pictures with a few poor people. People forget fast." He set his fork down slowly, the sound sharp in the silence. "Poor people aren't props, Claudia." She gave a cold little laugh. "Oh, don't be naive. The world runs on optics. You of all people should know that." He met her gaze and said nothing. But in that moment, something final passed between them, the quiet death of whatever love had once lived there. The next day, Daniel went back to the community kitchen. This time, he didn't come to apologize. He came to help. He rolled up his sleeves, washed vegetables, handed out meals. The rich man among the forgotten. The volunteers stared at first, but Maya didn't say a word. She just watched. Hours passed. He stayed until the last bowl was served, until the floor was mopped, until the lights went dim. As they locked up, Maya finally spoke. "You don't have to keep coming here," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I want to." She studied his face for a moment, searching for the man he used to be, the one she met all those years ago. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, she saw him again. That night, as Daniel drove home, the city lights flickered across his windshield like broken stars. He realized he didn't miss the applause of the rich. He missed the peace that came from meaning something real. Back at the mansion, Claudia was on the phone with her event planner, her voice sharp as glass. "Make sure the guest list includes the press," she said. "This time, we'll show them who the real victims are." But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. He was done living for show. He sat in the dark of his study, replaying Maya's words in his head. "Sorry doesn't feed a child." He thought of the soup line, the children laughing, the quiet dignity in her movements. He thought of what grace looked like, and how far he'd drifted from it. Outside, rain tapped the windows again, soft and rhythmic, like forgiveness waiting at the door. And as the thunder rolled in the distance, Daniel finally whispered to himself, she was never the one who needed to change. Somewhere across town, Maya was closing her eyes, trying to forget the humiliation, trying to forgive the world that tore her dress and her peace in the same night. She didn't know yet what was coming, that fate would bring her back into that same world, not as a servant, but as someone impossible to ignore. The story of the torn dress wasn't over. It was just getting ready to turn. The restaurant air was heavy with humiliation. Conversations resumed in careful murmurs, forks clinking timidly. But beneath that surface calm, something electric stirred. Ava stood in silence, the torn dress clinging to her frame like a wound that refused to close. Her eyes, once soft and patient, now held the quiet fire of a woman who had seen this before. On the other side of the room, Natalie Cross, dripping in diamonds, drenched in arrogance, lifted her glass again, trying to laugh off the scene. Her husband, Thomas Cross, shifted uncomfortably. He had seen the look in Ava's eyes too. It wasn't anger, It was truth. Then the door to the private suite opened. A hush fell over the room. From the shadows, a tall man stepped forward, broad-shouldered, composed, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that whispered quiet power. His skin gleamed under the amber light. His expression unreadable. Every head turned. Natalie froze mid-laugh. Ava didn't move. She didn't need to. The man's voice, when it came, was deep, measured, restrained, but sharp enough to cut glass. "Who tore my wife's dress?" Gasps. Forks stopped midair. The waiter nearly dropped a tray. Natalie blinked, her confidence evaporating. "Wife," she stammered. You're what?" He stepped closer, every word deliberate. "My wife. Ava Daniels. The co-founder of Daniels and Cross Development." The silence that followed was absolute. Only the faint hum of the ceiling fans broke it. Natalie's face drained of color. The words didn't compute. Her mind scrambled for footing, for logic, anything that could justify what she had just done. But Thomas knew. He had seen Ava before. At board meetings. On magazine covers. In business articles that called her the woman who built a fortune from integrity. He had just never connected this Ava, the woman in a simple summer dress, pouring wine with quiet grace, with a mogul who had once turned down a billion-dollar buyout from his company. His stomach churned. Natalie looked around, desperate for rescue. She told me she was staff. I thought. You thought wrong, Ava said quietly. Her tone wasn't cruel, it was precise. You saw brown skin and a dress that wasn't designer, and you thought I couldn't belong here. A flicker of tears glimmered behind Natalie's eyes, but it wasn't remorse, it was fear. Ava continued, her voice trembling not with anger, but with history. You tore the fabric, but it's the pattern that's old. The pattern where women like me are always the help, no matter what we build. She turned toward the diners who had watched in silence. Some looked away. Some shifted in shame. Thomas stood slowly, eyes on his wife. Natalie, he whispered, you didn't just embarrass her. You embarrassed us. The words landed like thunder. Natalie's lips parted, but no sound came. Ava's husband, Michael Daniels, looked at the staff, nodded once. Please, take Mrs. Daniels to our table. His voice softened when he turned to her. You don't have to prove anything. Not tonight. But Ava wasn't finished. As she moved toward the suite, she stopped beside Natalie. The room seemed to lean in. You tore the dress, Ava said. But you can't tear the dignity of a woman who knows her worth. Then she walked away, back straight, head high, every step echoing through the marble hall. Behind her, the crowd remained still. Natalie sat frozen, her hands trembling. The diamond bracelet on her wrist suddenly felt heavy, meaningless. Later that night, the restaurant's quiet luxury seemed colder. Thomas sat alone, staring into his untouched drink. His phone buzzed, an email from Michael Daniels' company. The subject line read, regarding future partnerships. He opened it. It was a termination notice. Effective immediately. His heart sank. His wife's actions hadn't just humiliated them, they had destroyed a multimillion-dollar alliance. In the parking lot, Natalie sat in the car, staring out the window. She set me up, she whispered weakly. She made me look like a monster. Thomas looked at her reflection. His voice was hollow. She didn't have to make you look like anything. You showed them who you were. He started the car, but silence filled the space between them, heavy, suffocating. Natalie's mind replayed the moment over and over, the rip of the fabric, the gasps, the quiet, the look in Ava's eyes. It wasn't the look of a victim. It was the look of someone who had already forgiven her, and that forgiveness burned more than hate ever could. By the next morning, social media had the story. A witness had recorded everything. The video spread like wildfire. Racist woman tears CEO's dress, mistakes her for waitress. Comment sections exploded. Hashtags trended. Memes flooded timelines. And somewhere in the chaos, Natalie realized what she had truly lost. Not her status, not her marriage, not even her reputation. She had lost her humanity. But Ava, quiet, graceful Ava, had gained something far more enduring, respect that could not be bought, and a voice that could not be silenced. The video had gone viral. By sunrise, it wasn't just a story, it was a reckoning. Millions watched it. Some cried. Some raged. Others saw themselves reflected in Natalie's careless cruelty, and didn't like what they saw. The footage began with the tear. The sound was raw, fabric ripping, gasps rising. But what lingered wasn't the sound, it was the silence that followed, and Ava's eyes. Those steady, sorrowful eyes that said everything without saying a word. At the Cross residence, the curtains were drawn tight. Reporters camped outside. Camera flashes punctured the morning gloom. Natalie hadn't slept. She sat by the edge of her bed, phone in hand, scrolling through comments that felt like bullets. She thought class was about color. This is why humility matters. That woman tore a dress but exposed a soul. Each line felt heavier than the last. Her husband, Thomas, stood by the window, jaw tight, suit half-buttoned. He had been on the phone all night. PR teams, lawyers, investors. The Cross name was sinking. Contracts were being withdrawn. Invitations rescinded. "Thomas," she whispered finally, "it was a mistake." He didn't turn around. "No, Natalie." It was a revelation. She blinked, unsure. He faced her then, eyes tired but unflinching. "You didn't just ruin dinner. You revealed the truth about who we've become. About how small we are inside all this wealth." She wanted to argue, to justify, but words failed her. He picked up his briefcase. "You want redemption," he said quietly. "Start with honesty." Then he left, the door closing softly, but it sounded like judgment. Across town, Ava sat on her balcony, the morning sun warming her shoulders. She held a cup of tea in her hands, steam rising gently, like forgiveness taking form. Michael joined her. "You don't have to go public," he said softly. "I know. Then why do it?" She looked out toward the skyline, tall buildings she helped build, standing over a city that still didn't know how to see her. "Because silence protects comfort," she said. "But the truth heals pain. I've spent my life working for equality on paper. Maybe it's time to remind people it still matters in the heart." He nodded, understanding without needing to speak. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm just tired. But if my tiredness can wake even one person, maybe it's worth it." A few weeks later, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Daniels Foundation headquarters. Natalie Cross. No cameras. No assistants. No diamond bracelets. Just a woman stripped of her armor. The receptionist hesitated, recognizing her instantly from the viral clip. I'd like to see Mrs. Daniels," Natalie said quietly. "If she'll allow it." Moments later, Ava appeared, poised, graceful, her expression calm. Natalie stood, wringing her hands. "I came to apologize," she began, voice trembling. "Not to the internet, not to my husband, but to you. I thought I was better because of money, because of skin, because of lies I was raised to believe. But I see now, you have something I've never had, peace." Ava studied her for a long moment, then motioned toward a chair. "Sit," she said softly. Natalie obeyed, tears already threatening. "I didn't know who you were," Natalie whispered. Ava smiled faintly. "You still don't. And that's the point. You shouldn't have to know someone's name to treat them with dignity." The words landed like truth-breaking glass. Natalie nodded, tears spilling freely. "I've lost everything." Ava leaned forward. "Then maybe you're finally free to learn what really matters." Natalie wept openly, and for the first time, Ava reached across the table, not to comfort, but to connect. Their hands met. It wasn't forgiveness spoken aloud. It was forgiveness understood. Months passed. The viral storm faded, but the memory didn't. Ava started a scholarship in her late mother's name, for young women of color studying hospitality and management. She called it the Grace Project. At the first scholarship ceremony, Ava took the stage. The crowd rose in applause. Cameras flashed. She spoke calmly, her voice steady and warm. "Some think dignity is something you're given," she said. "But it's not. It's something you carry, quietly, even when others try to tear it away. Among the audience sat Natalie, unnoticed, dressed simply. She smiled faintly, eyes glistening, as if hearing the sermon her soul had needed all along. When the ceremony ended, Natalie approached Ava once more, this time to donate anonymously to the scholarship fund. Not as atonement, but as growth. The story would later appear in magazines under headlines like, "From Racism to Redemption, the Woman Who Learned Grace." But Ava never gave interviews. She refused to monetize pain. Instead, she lived quieter, more peacefully, knowing that sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge. It's restraint. And Natalie? She sold her mansion, moved to a modest neighborhood, started volunteering at a local shelter that trained single mothers in hospitality. She didn't tell anyone who she used to be. She just worked, folding napkins, cleaning tables, serving coffee with a humility that could only be learned the hard way. One afternoon, a young black waitress asked, "Why are you doing this?" Natalie smiled faintly. "Because once, I tore a woman's dress, and she taught me how to stitch a heart instead." The girl didn't understand the reference fully, but she smiled back, and somehow that was enough. The measure of a person isn't what they wear or what they own. It's how they treat those they believe can give them nothing in return. Because power fades, beauty fades, but grace leaves a mark that even time can't erase. The camera pans upward, over a city skyline bathed in golden light. Ava walks hand in hand with Michael along a quiet street. In another corner of the city, Natalie wipes down a counter, looks up at the sunset, and finally smiles. 2 women. 1 lesson. That dignity can't be torn, only revealed.